Hey guys and gals, it's Logan Freeman with the LiveFree Investors Podcast, where I interview investors and business owners who share investment advice so you too can live free. Today, I am talking to Adapia. Adapia, please, in a few sentences, just tell us who you are and what you do. And I know that might be a little bit difficult, but I want to hear what your response is.
Well, I need some practice at being concise. So, yeah. So I would say, well, first of all, thanks for having
Of
me.
course.
Adapia Dorico. Professionally, I am a principal and VP of strategy at Alpha Investing. We are a real estate private equity firm.
Yep.
We syndicate multifamily, senior living, affordable housing, LP equity to our network of high net worth, ultra high net worth investors. I love the real estate space. I've been in the fintech space for 7 years. I helped launch real estate crowdfunding as an industry. So very familiar with online capital raising,
Yeah.
but just really I just really love real estate. And then personally, I am really passionate about empowerment, like from spiritual all the way to financial. And the reason that's really important is that understanding who we are at the core helps us achieve what we want in life.
Absolutely.
And financial it's so important to get that financial foundation right. So anything I can do to help empower people in all those areas of life, just really passionate about that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that a lot because when you think about just life in general, everybody picks a vehicle to kind of go through life in, right? And it's like,
Mhm.
where are you going to focus from a career standpoint? That's great. Pick the right one, and commercial real estate's a great one to be in. But at the same time, that's a really small piece of who we are and what we do. Actually, I would argue it's not who we are at all. It's
Really,
more or less what we do. And so
totally.
many folks get their identity from what they do. And when that gets taken away from them, similar to my experience in athletics, you're left with what? And so
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to really have you on today, is because we've had some conversations where I was just like, man, I thought I was introspective and really started to work on me, but she's taking it to another level. So maybe share a little bit about how that came about, right? Because most people don't get that far. They need to, right? I talk
Mhm.
about it a lot, and it's something I'm very passionate about, is understanding who we are. And then that's when you can start to really enjoy life, right? It's one of my favorite words, joy, and not just happiness, but joy. So
Yeah.
maybe take us back a little bit, and just kind of go through one or two stories that you want to that kind of helped you kind of get to the place where you're at now.
Yeah, well, thank you. And yes, it's everything. It's what we do and it's a choice, and like how we do it is everything. And like I always say, self-awareness is a cornerstone of leadership. Like if we're going to lead, and we're all leaders in our own way, we really have to know ourselves.
Mm.
And I think my first experience of really understanding that was back actually, I'll start with this personal story and then a professional one. So
Sure.
in the personal sense, when I left my first marriage, which was something that I stayed in for far too long, for other people, for all the wrong reasons, so to speak, um, like misplaced loyalties, whatever. It woke me up. I was 32 years old when I left, and I was like, I don't know who I am.
Yep.
I've been living this life, this picture perfect life, all for everybody else, because I have to show up as like, I'm independent, I'm strong, nothing's wrong with me, I got this. And I didn't have this. I was like
Hmm.
totally broken.
Yep.
And so that really started this like, who am I? Sort of in that sense. And of course, like my whole life changed,
Sure.
broke apart, back up. But I always had as an identity my career self. And
Hmm.
so even while I had to like revisit all the personal parts of me, I was always like strong in career. I mean, I got started in banking when I was 18 years old. So like I knew what I wanted, right? Like
Sure.
I was like going for it. And so I had that anchor. I had one really strong leg to stand on at that point.
Absolutely.
And so when a few years later, that identity unraveled, when I, made this like real leap of faith to leave my career at that point. Like I just got this like, you hear the story, people are like, oh, I have this like sense that I needed to do more, something different, give back. So I left a career, pinnacle of my career. I was the COO of a fintech firm. And I decided I'm going to leave this and I'm going to, in my mind at that time, I'm going to start a blog. I'm going to coach. I'm going to help women. And what really happened is I totally failed. Like I totally failed. And in failing, I actually found that I didn't want to be a solopreneur, not my thing.
It's a
B,
lonely
I
world.
had, oh my goodness, just not for me. And you get hit by all these advertisements about how you should be a solopreneur and blah, blah, blah. And fundamentally that threw me into a dark night.
Sure.
Situation. I was like, who am I? I am not making money. My house is under construction. I'm losing like my current husband, who's my soulmate. And I'm like, this is no good, no good.
Yep.
So that all threw me into a big introspective, like identity crisis. And then I finally re-landed on, actually, I love business. I love finance. I love real estate. I want partners who appreciate me for me, authentic me. They don't want me to be a silver bullet. They want Adapia for what she's really good at. And I found them, and that's alpha investing. I haven't looked back since. And I love what I do. I love my partners.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. One question I wanted to ask you about this is, I study a lot of successful people, but then I try to model my own life and think about my life too, about, how I can go along the same path. But, I had an identity crisis. I had a big breakdown, all of these things. Lost my father to drugs and alcohol, lost 120 pounds, was no longer an athlete. All of this stuff kind of happened at once, which kind of took me to, physically, I was in the best shape of my life. Mentally, I was like, what that was my outlet, right? So I hit rock bottom there. In your experience, do people have to hit rock bottom to find who they are? Because, frankly, like I think about this from my wife's perspective. My wife has never really experienced loss. And this is something from her words, not mine, by the way. So this is something that she brings to me and says, hey, you've been through a lot, but I have not been through any of that. My life has been amazing up to this point. So in your mind, how do people not get to that rock bottom? Because I don't think you have to go there to kind of find yourself. But it seems to me through studying really successful people, there's always some sort of rock bottom. So let's talk about that a little bit.
That is just such an incredibly like deep question.
Yeah.
Because partly for some of us, then this might be like way out there for people, but some of us have to.
Yeah.
And we have to because we are so caught up in this conditioning and this identity. So some of us who have not been able to really go into that place and like I would call it like honoring the self, like really being able to know who I really am.
Sure.
Also, though, there's no shame in the identity because we also have to go through certain lessons to get to, who we are.
Right.
And we all have different experiences. Some of us have way more dramatic. Like your wife sounds like my husband. He's, I mean, he's just fine. Always has been. But he and I also have very different ways of thinking. Like, if something goes wrong, I'm like, it's my fault. This is just like, that's like where I come from. And that's a conditioned response. If something goes wrong with him, he's like, oh, that's not my fault. It wasn't me.
Yep.
And I'm like, that's like such an amazing place to be. And also I had a lot more scarcity. I had a lot more fear. He's like, I'm always going to be okay. I have none of that. So it's kind of like this weird karma that some people have. And I love and admire the people who don't necessarily have to go through drama but they're rare to find. Honestly, most people do. And it's just part of it. And I think one of the things that's really important is to reframe it. Yeah. Because it doesn't have to be that dramatic, like, and it doesn't have to be that challenging. It just depends how much like we have our claws in this idea of the identity and how much we want to be in control of it. So it kind of always comes back to the ego
Sure.
versus somebody who's a lot more in flow and a lot more trusting of life.
Yeah.
That's been my experience. So I guess the short answer is no, you don't have to. However, most people do,
Right.
because most people are I mean, everyone's conditioned,
Sure.
but most of us have to break out of it, like a tree breaks out of a seed
Yeah.
to come through.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. And one thing that I also wanted to ask you is, I think she's okay not, having the same experience that I is. So is accepting that, hey, my life doesn't look like yours, and that is okay. Partly because of the family, upbringing, partly because of people that she had in her lives and advantages, obviously. That's been a big eye-opening experience for me over the last 12 months is understanding, that not everybody's situation is the same, and there really are disadvantages for other groups of people. I've had
Wow.
like a meeting this morning or earlier this week with a gentleman who was a star running back at Mizzou, and he made it to the NFL and got cut. But he tells me stories about his grandma washing his parents with snow on the outside in Kansas City because they didn't have water, right? Like I realized I didn't have everything, but I never worried about water,
Right.
And
Yep.
so that comes back to this other question of that she asks me sometimes is she's fearful of something happening because she hasn't gone through it before.
Mm.
And so
Mhm.
like that, I think there's for somebody who maybe hasn't had a drama, filled life or something that's happened to them is, usually something happens in life that's going to create some discomfort and there's growth there, but fearing, what is to come a little bit has been a work in progress for us to say, sweetheart, thankfully, whatever comes at us in life, I have already been through it. So I can some sort insulate you from that. And you don't need to feel bad for not having to go to that rock bottom place. And so I guess there's just this dichotomy of there is benefits from going through it, but there's also a lot of downsides because people hit rock bottom and they never get back up, right? That's something we haven't talked about is they've never been able to bring themselves back up to where they need to be. And I think that's what maybe this conversation can really enlighten people from, because the last 12 months also, people have been laid off from their work. They have had to switch jobs. Their whole lives have been changed, right? And you might be in that place right now. But we're living proof, and we're only two examples out of millions that the decisions that you decide to make next could be the most important ones of your life. And never forget, this is my overarching message to people this year: you are loved, you are unique, and you are awesome. It's just up to you to find that. And what I've really started to admire about people is everybody's unique qualities and how diversity, and sorry, I'm going on a little bit of a rant here, but this is something that's very passionate to me right now, is diversity in thinking in your life creates new opportunities. And I go back to one of my mentors, and I call Wayne Dyer one of my mentors. People probably laugh at me, but he has been one of my mentors in life, is being open to everything and attached to nothing. Because the older you get and the more you know, the less you really know, right? And it's just been a fun experience for me to say, I used to think I was always right. There's only one way to do it. I had a hammer, everything looked like a nail, and I'm just going to smash it as hard as I can. And being more strategic in my age has been so helpful. Any thoughts on that? I know I kind of went on a little bit of a ramble there.
No, I get it. Look, like, um, if we approach anything in life with fear, we're just gonna not have a good experience of
Yeah.
life. Something might happen. I mean, anything could happen, but living in fear of infinite possibility
Hmm.
is silly, because you could live in anticipation of infinite opportunity as
Absolutely.
well. So it's like where you place yourself, like, how do you want to, how do you want to feel about it? And to those who are like, well, I haven't gone through a big drama or dark night, like,
Hmm.
amazing. stay where you are.
Yeah.
If you have to go through it, you will, but know that you can resource yourself. There's people to help, because here's the thing. If we don't ask for help, big lesson for me,
Sure.
right? I never asked for help. It's just, you just suffer way more.
Absolutely.
And then you learn also every time you go through something, so that like the next time you might have a challenge, it isn't such like a life altering thing. It's just, you realize like, oh, that's a challenge that I have to go through. No big deal. To your point, the last 12 months have shown us unequivocally
Mm-hmm.
other people's situations that were hidden. We see truths about a lot of things that we weren't necessarily looking for, wanted to see, and now we do. And so it's like, what are you going to do about it? Like, how are you going to help? Like, what can we do?
Yeah.
And there's so much more compassion in the world. There's so much more
Yes.
heart-centered leadership, and that's what really matters. It's like, there's a problem. What can I do to help? Right.
Yes.
And yes, there are people that have situations where they might not be able to get out, and we also can't help everyone, but what we can, and that's the thing, right? It's like, we always get overwhelmed, and we do this with goal setting too. Like, here's my big giant goal, and it's like, oh crap, I don't know how I'm going to do that. So you chunk it down.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing when you face a big problem, chunk it down.
Yeah.
Big global issue, chunk it down. I can do this, right?
That's right.
And so I would say you bring in a practical approach to something that would otherwise, like, mentally, emotionally, even spiritually, like, overwhelm.
Yes. I mean, I don't know if you've ever studied Charlie Munger, but I love having women on my show. I love spending time with other women in the space. Frankly, it's a very unrepresented, group of people in the commercial real estate space. My broker is a woman, and that's very strategic for me. I told you that with Raquel on the first call, is I couldn't be more happy about being in that group with two other women because of this. But what you're basically saying is there's a mental model that you can approach things and problems to that has been proven, and it's truth. It's rooted in truth. And Marcus Aurelius said always, when he was out there, doing his speeches, and said, look, you guys, this is the way I'm thinking about this, but please tell me if I am wrong. The truth is what I seek. And, I've learned that this year I am seeking truth. I'm seeking truth in personal life, but also in business, because there's tried and true methodologies that continue to work. Now, applying that truth on the effective applied level is not easy, and it's not usually the right thing, or it's not usually the popular thing either, but it is the right thing to do. And so thank you for sharing that. It just, I just keep hearing these themes from really smart people that I just keep plugging away at. And frankly, if anybody listens to this show, that I'm here to learn, and I'm very selective with who I bring on these days, because time is very valuable, obviously, but also I want to learn from people that are smarter than me, and also doing what I want to do, which, you fit both of those buckets, by the way. So that being said, you have a new book out, and I want to talk a little bit about the inception of the book. So kind of asking some questions around why the book was written, what the message that you're trying to get across is, and then I know I'll have follow-up questions, but let's talk about that inception story.
Right. Well, thank you. Yeah. So I published a book, 2020, called Productive Intuition, Connecting to the Subtle. And I must say the pandemic was the catalyst that allowed me to really finish it and drive it home, because it's a long process.
Yes.
And the reason I wrote the book, it's really about finding inner authority. I believe that we are the only authority in our own lives. Like, I am the only authority in my life. You are the only authority in your life. To go back to the conditioning, we're always conditioned to go to external validation, an external expert, an external authority. Tell me what to do.
Sure.
When instead it should be inner validation. What is right to me? What is my truth in this moment? What do I want? And honoring myself and listening to myself, and most importantly, trusting myself. So the book is a big exercise in how to trust yourself, and actually go through in our biology too, because I actually break down how we're wired for intuition. It's not just like for psychics or some weird phenomenon, like it's in our biology. And to work through how to connect to yourself in such a way where, to be honest, like if we take it from a pure productivity perspective, I mean, decisions are faster, more effective, more correct. I use a lot of my own experiences and stories, like including leaving, that there's a marriage story in there.
Sure.
And then finding my partners, really like understanding who I am, what I want. And, other stories, like, this is also like a real estate podcast. Like I lost a lot of money to fraud.
Yep.
And I didn't listen to my intuition that was just like off the charts. And I used my, prefrontal cortex, and I rationalized it all away. And I lost it. And that was 7 years ago. And that taught me so much about trusting myself and like how it works. And I want people to feel the way I feel today, which is when I have my anchor to my inner authority, things are just so much smoother. I'm not
Sure.
saying that like life is like no problems, but the problems just seem like things that I'm just like, oh, I can tackle that, instead of like, it's a big drama. It's not drama, because I know what to do. So that's really what the book is about.
Amazing. It's absolutely an amazing concept to think about, and one that hits home for me, very, very strong, because, I think that challenges, I look at challenges now as opportunities.
Yes.
But, and I try to help my younger sister through this. She's been through a lot in her life as well. Everybody usually has, but challenges. She literally has a chemical makeup in her brain that it takes a lot to rewire, right? If you can. Sometimes you cannot. Sometimes you can, but you can at least understand between stimulus and response, there's an opportunity to tell the story. And that story that you tell yourself, meaning, hey, an emotion is going to come no matter what. A feeling is after you tell yourself that story. And so just trying to work with her, because challenges always seem like this massive roadblock, like something that I cannot, and you get fixated, right? You get blinders on and you cannot get it past it. And that really is what debilitates people. And that's when substance abuse really has happened in my own family's lives, right? Is like you turn to an outside external stimulus to make you feel a certain way. When you can turn that from alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, sex, there's a lot of different things so many different things. When you can tap into that inner authority and say, now I know exactly what to do here, and I'm going to control my story. That's when you start to give yourself power back, right? And that's where I think that everybody's trying to, or at least seeking out to. And there's a lot of different outlets for that, right? I'm a very faith-filled guy, and it's because I was brought up in that framework that works for me. It doesn't work for everybody. But Lewis Howes, early on in my career, changed my life when he said, typically really, strong people that have a strong sense of belief have either a faith in a higher power or a super strong faith in yourself. And even better if you have both, right? And so that's where I'm trying to get to. And it's a lifelong, experience, right? But that's what I'm trying to communicate to her when we're talking about, these things that happen, is like, look, you have a choice here to make. But if you don't have that foundation of knowing who you are and how you deal with those things, that's where I think depression really starts to come into account. And I'm starting to understand that, right? It's like, I've never dealt with that personally, because I've always just been a bulldozer, and I'm like, hey, no matter how I feel, I'm just going to do this thing. And, but Abe Lincoln taught me as well, was like, hey, when you're upset about something, write it down, like get it out of your brain, write it down, put it in one of your drawers of your desk, and then revisit it tomorrow. And if you feel the same way, then write it again. And then if you feel, you know, um,
Yeah.
and he had this, his wife was incredible. She would actually take all those letters that he handed her to send, and she filed them away. She never sent any of them. Which,
Oh, that is amazing.
and just think about the impact that guy has had, though, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just incredible like that. But it's just this idea, this notion of not reacting to a situation, but responding instead.
Yeah.
And that's where I try to bring in the tactical empathy. So I get the inception of the book. What are some main takeaways, or what are some main ideas that you kind of present to folks? Like, what do you want people to get out of that, the book? Because I know how hard it is to
Mhm.
write a book, to
Yeah.
even get a framework for a book. And so there's got to be an overarching theme, right? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of what you said is like woven in there. I mean, like the main thing about the book is it's connecting to your inner authority, and
Yep.
intuition is a way to get that. And whatever you want to call inner authority, like soul, higher self, whatever
Yep.
it is, doesn't really matter. Call it what you will. That is that deep piece of you. That's the trusting yourself. That's the faith in yourself. This book is about finding it, showing you exactly where it is, how to get there. That's like the main overarching theme. So I talk a lot about authority and sovereignty, and this like, and it's a book about inner work to a degree too,
Sure.
because to get there, we have to go in. How do you go in? So I present reflection questions, a lot of resources, activities. You can journal directly in the book, because what you said, the between when something happens and the response, that time, that space needs to be occupied by nothing other than introspection. Right? We have to pause.
Yes.
And so the book has a lot of practical applications. And I framed it, the first half of the book is really framed with a lot of science. Like, what is intuition? Right? Because for me, being such a left brain dominant person,
Mhm.
I'm not just going to accept somebody saying something like, esoteric. I mean, I
Sure.
love esoteric studies. Don't get me wrong. I actually really like them. I think there's like beautiful things there. However, I'm not just going to believe something. So I'm like, how does this work? So I actually present the science, because we as human beings need to use our body, because that's where intuition is
Yes.
mostly active. And so we also need to bring the left brain on board, right? A lot of us aren't just going to take somebody's word for it. I'm like, prove it.
Right.
So here it is. I'm showing you exactly how it works,
Yes.
how your emotional, like how emotions are part of intuition, how the brain functions with intuition, how the heart functions with intuition. And also a little bit more of a spiritual component, like energetically. And then it's like, how do you apply all this in your life very practically, finding meaning, aligning to your values, being authentic, being your own authority, sharing with others, telling your story.
Sure.
You brought up story a few times.
Yeah.
And we can rewrite our stories. I do workshops about this now, how to go into a defining moment in your life, and you get to rewrite your story because you're seeing it from a new perspective. And you get to say, hey, you know what? Because memory is fallible, first of all. And you go back into your story, and you, with the wisdom and the experience and the perspective of who you are today, and you see yourself for who you were back then, with compassion, with forgiveness. And you realize so much about that situation. And instead of maybe you're carrying a judgment towards yourself, all of a sudden you do this work and you're like, hey, you know what? I'm okay.
Yep.
That judgment, gone, out of here. I forgive myself, because what I actually learned, what was the gift? What did I actually learn? What did I actually get? Not what I wanted, because most of us don't get what we want.
Yep.
What did I get, and how was that a gift to me? And all of a sudden you shift inside, energetically, mentally, you have this total shift into an empowered state. So the book is very much about getting people there.
Yes.
And I have multiple approaches, because we're multidimensional.
Sure.
Everybody has different ways of doing it. So I come at it from as many angles as possible, so that people, especially business people, right, that might not resonate with like highly spiritual stuff, I talk about this in a very practical way. And so my hope is that look, when I started doing my inner work, when I started to figure this out, when I started to understand it, like everything in my life changed. Um, and I won't say that, look, actually I will. Sometimes things happen that seem magical and that seem like, I don't know how this just happened, faith, belief, the universe, what have you. That money I lost 7 years ago, I got back just this year. And I had to go through so much personal inner work because I didn't want to face what happened. I didn't want to go back into the shame that I still carried.
Sure.
It's a long story, and it's actually like statistically a miracle that I got this money back, because usually you don't. I mean, that there was a criminal trial involved. That's how bad this was. Okay. Nobody gets their money back. I did.
Yep.
And I know that I made some really big mental, energetic shifts around what I was holding on to emotionally, and judgment towards myself and even towards this person.
Absolutely.
So sometimes these things happen. And when they do, you realize I can trust not just myself, but I can trust life.
Yeah.
And then we can go back and say, I can handle anything that comes at me. Like, I am never given a challenge that I cannot transmute into a lesson of wisdom, for myself and also for others. And that's why all these successful people go through the stuff, and then they're all called to share, because we have to grow, and break out of the conditions that are actually keeping us small.
Absolutely. Wow. I saw you go deep there. You close your eyes. If anybody just needs to hear a message, go back a minute or two, like I will be doing, and re-listen to that, because that was absolute gold. And that is a massive message, and such an inspiring one to so many people right now. If it looked like I was doing something while you were speaking early on, it's because I was purchasing the book. So that's done. So I can get that book here, but also for my sister, so we can read that book together. And I think that'll be a beautiful thing for us. One, because I want to support you, but two, I wanted to talk about it. I know that book's going to help me as well. But what you're talking about is being complete at the theoretical level and effective at the applied level. And you're reaching not only business people, but other folks that aren't in the business world per se. And I love that idea. So with that being said, we're going to wrap up here pretty soon, because I just want people to really hear that message as you just landed. And we could talk about real estate all day long. That's that's fine. We can do that again at another time. But one question I did want to ask that we haven't got to was, with everything that has been going on, right? I mean, life changing, and so many people's lives are different than what they were 12 months ago. How do you, just on a personal and professional level, keep up with all of the different challenges, opportunities, or even trends on a regular basis? Cut through the noise a little bit is what I like to call it, is let everything else stay over there and focus on what I need to focus on, because it's very distracting out there right now. So how do you approach that in your own life?
Yeah, that's like the question. It's a huge question, and I think one of the things that I've really landed on with it for myself is like, and you kind of alluded to this, I think you do a really good job of it, is that rather than me try to be an expert at everything, I'm going to learn from others. So I'm going to pick some people that I specifically think are like really excellent at doing what they do or having their information. And I'm going to pick up that information from them. So for example, at Alpha, I am not the head of underwriting. And Lynn is. She's a pro at that. I learned from her, right? I ask questions. If anything, I'm like not even like hold a candle to her light in terms of underwriting. I don't try to be an underwriter. I know what I'm good at, right? Like people that are domain specific or geographic specific, or like, and I pick a few that I resonate with, because like everybody has something to say, right? Everybody does. So if I resonate, if that feels like, resonant to me, and that person resonates with me and I respect them, and it lands, then that information, I'm going to get my information from them, even though 100 other people might have the same information.
Sure.
So it's the same. Look, it's the same with, like, for me with, like, yoga teachers. It has to be the right teacher for me. Not everyone's my teacher.
Yep.
Like, only a few are my teacher. And when they are, it's like spot on. I love it. So the same thing. And so, especially now, we were talking about Clubhouse earlier, right? Like, to me, I'm just like, that's a platform I'm going to use. LinkedIn is a platform that I use.
Yep.
Whereas before, and to be honest, like last year, I was like, maybe I should be using Instagram more for business. And it just created such a mess in my head because I couldn't figure this out. And now I just said, you know what? I'm going to let it go. That's not what I'm going to use for business. That's my personal. And I chose, let's say I chose LinkedIn, and now I'm choosing Clubhouse as my other one. And I breathed such a sigh of relief about it, because I was like, choose your path.
Yeah.
That's the problem. We think that we need to consider everything. Whereas instead we actually need to throw most of it away and, like, choose the things that we focus on at the beginning of every year, more or less. I have my, like, buckets. What are the things I'm really going to focus on? So for example, I wrote the book last year. And I thought, oh, maybe I should do a course, blah, blah, blah. But I chose not to this year. That's not my focus this year. To be honest, now that I have this money back that I lost, my responsibility, way more important than creating a course, is investing it.
Absolutely.
Is like thinking about this financial foundation that I help other people do. Now I have the opportunity to do it.
Yep.
That is a much more important focus than that. I can do that later. So it's like really just like honing in on those big things and doing those, and not trying to do everything all at once. Cause I know we think we should, but we actually shouldn't, to be honest, to use the should word. So that's like, and it's a hard exercise.
Sure.
And it's part of my inner work. It's part of the journaling. It's part of, like, cause things will come up, right? And I'll be like, oh, maybe I should do this. So I'll write it down, and I have a mess of notes of all the things that I think I should do. And they just, maybe I'll revisit them every once in a while, like Abe Lincoln's letters.
Yep.
And then I realized, like, no, that's not actually it. But if something doesn't leave me alone, then I have to explore it a little bit further. And that's how I make that determination. That's
beautiful. It reminds me of something Tim Ferriss wrote about. He basically said, make one decision that frees up 100 others. Right. And usually it's the decision to say no to something. So thank you for sharing that, Adapia. Can you please tell everyone where they can reach out to you, find the book, start following the message that you are putting out there into the marketplace, which is a beautiful one?
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say, you said something really good. I love this. I love this phrase, and I want people to really hear this. No is a complete sentence. Like, no is such a powerful, powerful thing. Absolutely. That in our culture we think is a bad thing. It is not. No is so powerful. And really, like, use your words, use the word no as often as possible. So that, just based on what you said. And then for people to find me, I'd love for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can look me up, my name, Adapia, really easy to find. You can plug me into the internet and I will come up on all the platforms. Most active on LinkedIn. My book is Productive Intuition. So you can go to productiveintuition.com to learn a little bit more about it, or on Amazon. It's available on Amazon. And for those on Clubhouse, I'm also on Clubhouse as Adapia. Instagram, if you want to see pictures of my mountain home and my dogs, and I do post some inspirational stuff here and there, but most, and a lot of my inner work kind of stuff. But and I'm happy to connect with everybody, everywhere, but Productive Intuition, LinkedIn. I do have a personal website, adapiaderico.com. So come and connect. I would love to connect further, and if you have questions too, if I can be helpful, please don't hesitate.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll have all those links in the post that we put out, so you'll be able to find her And well, frankly, I don't think there's a lot of Adapias out there
Yeah.
anyways. So that's a good benefit for you. So all right, guys, this is Logan Freeman. This has been the Live Free Investors Podcast, where investors and business owners share not only investment advice, but personal intuition advice so you too can live free. For more insights and ideas on how you can live free, you just connect with us on LinkedIn, and you can go to the links that we'll have in the show notes. Adapia, I mean, showstopper today. I don't say that very often. Thank you so much for joining, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Logan. Thanks so much for having me and for opening up the space, and also for people listening that they have an opportunity to hear this kind of information. It's really
Absolutely.
important that as leaders in what we do, we show up personally with our vulnerability, and you model that so well. So I really
Thank
want to
you.
honor
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so much. Until next time, guys and gals, live free.